So we know what players are coming and going on the defensive side of the ball. So let's look at some scheme options to slow down opposing Big 12 offenses. What are the keys to success on that side of the ball? Ian Boyd, X and O's writer over at Inside Texas, has returned to break down our personnel's strengths and weaknesses. First things first, hop over to Inside Texas to stay informed on your favorite program. Team coverage, recruiting, scheme, and more being reported daily. Sign up at InsideTexas.com today. And even though we only added one transfer, the strategy could change significantly. Let's see how PK can turn it around and make the defense more stout. Without further ado, let's get into it. What's up, Ian? You had a piece the other day that informed my outlook on the Big 12, and our defense should be informed by how other offenses are looking to play us this year in the Big 12. So, how do you think the league will change offensively with the arrival of all the new coaches? And we just got out of the Big 12 stereotype of 60 to 59 games, but do you think we're going to see a return with that higher emphasis on the pass?
Yeah, I think the Big 12 is going to be back on its BS in some respect with offenses. It's remarkable, the genesis that article that you referenced. I was looking at just the change in pace for some of the Big 12 teams. Like Kansas State is going to go up tempo under Colin Klein more than they did before. And I was like, oh wow, that's an interesting idea. That'll change things up a little bit. And then I started looking around, and then I pulled up all the offensive coordinators that either coach Big 12 teams or that are going to coach Big 12 teams next year. And Texas was low in pace. The Big 12 in general was super low across the board in pace. They did not run a lot of plays. They had some of the slowest offenses in football. Oklahoma was super slow even. Lincoln Riley was never a pace and space guy. He was never fast, but they were extra plodding last year. And then if you looked at it, all of the coaches that were leaving the Big 12 that had been super slow were being replaced. And not only were they being replaced, but they were being replaced by guys that were among the fastest in the country. So like Tech was super slow last year, which is weird. I don't know why, but they were super slow last year. They bring in one of the fastest guys in the country, Zach Hitley from Western Kentucky. Graham Harrell, super fast version of what Mike Leach does. And he was at USC, now he's at West Virginia, who was super slow last year. Oklahoma, extremely slow last year, brought in one of the fastest coordinators in the country, Jeff Lebby from Ole Miss. I mentioned in the defensive video that we have a lot of starting defensive backs and starting sixth-year seniors across the Big 12 leaving the defenses. And now everybody's all gas, no brakes next year on offense. It's going to change the dynamics of the league.
And with the return of more air radiant philosophy like no huddle, quick game concepts, that should alter schemes. So going group by group, how do you feel about the interior defensive line's ability?
So the interior defensive line is definitely where Texas has the most talent and the most proven talent on their defense, because he's had some warts in his play, I'd say, but Keandre Coburn is kind of a known commodity. Like he's had several years now of being hard to run against. So I know he's not super popular amongst Texas fans, but he's a pretty good player. Moro Ojimo, good player. Alfred Collins flashed some amazing ability last year. Freakish athlete. Devondre Sweat, different than Collins, but also flashed some unreal ability and some freakish athleticism in a sort of, a bigger, different style package. Byron Murphy, I should mention, who might be the best one, actually. We'll see. As a freshman, was terrific last year. They have all these big bodies on the interior defensive line. It's the deepest position on the field. Honestly, they have too many to play. Like they ended up playing predominantly 3-down defense at the end of last year because they needed to replace Jacoby Jones with Alfred Collins a lot. And so they ended up adjusting the defense to be more 3-4 oriented. Nothing has changed since last year in that respect. So I expect them to really alter the defense to be able to be 3-down more consistently, but not be a 3-4 defense. I think that they're going to adjust their approach to be able to play more nickel while being in a 3-down defense.
3-3 has some advantages since our interior defensive line has depth, and it also de-emphasizes edge players, which we don't have many of. And I see you have your board behind you. So for the fans, what does 3-3 mean, and how would it look with our current players?
So I thought that they would run the sort of hybrid 3-3 defense that most teams run nowadays, where it's really more of a 4-down. You just have an edge who stands up and drops back and forth. When they didn't get either Drew Sanders or O'Shawn Mathis, it was back to the drawing board there. So what they could do instead of running a hybrid 3-down that looks like a 3-3-5 but could also look like a 4-2-5, I could foresee them instead running a true 3-3 stack. So the way that works is you have two defensive ends And one of them is going to be like a Moro Ojimo or an Alfred Collins, and maybe both of them are. They could play Baron Sorrell at one of these spots, or they could play Justice Finkley at one of these spots. But they could also get 3 interior D-line bodies on the same time and go like Ojimo, Coburn, Murphy, Sweat, whoever, and then Collins on the bottom. And that way you still have edges. Kwiatkowski can kind of coach them up all offseason on how that works. Collins and Ojimo have done it some in the past as well. And now you don't need an edge at all. Now, if Ovia Gofo is good, he could still play a stack Sam spot, kind of like he did last year. So could Derek Brown, Jamon Tapp. If these guys are ready to play, you could theoretically stack them. But otherwise, you have 3 stack linebackers who are not edge players. They're off-ball guys. And they can blitz and move around or whatever, but you could go Overshone, Ford, Benda if you wanted to. And then Ojimo Collins if you wanted. And not have any of these young edge guys on the field at all. Or you could play the edge guys, at one of these in spots or potentially one of these stack outside spots, depending on your requirements. But obviously this would give Texas a lot more flexibility to play their more older proven players and avoid the pitfalls of not having a good all Big 12 caliber edge.
And if we do end up in 3-3, how does this affect our ability to pass rush? Can we still get decent pressure on passing downs?
In obvious pass rush situations, this alignment is great because you are often blitzing and you can get really wonky up here. You can trade out the ends for the better young pass rushers who otherwise don't play because they don't know what to do against the run. So like a Jamon Tapp, you can play a Gofu there. You're not worried about him getting run over because you're just rushing the quarterback. Third down package, no big deal. 1st and 10, how do you get pressure on 1st and 10 if your defensive ends are Moro Ojimo and Alfred Collins or Alfred Collins and Baron Sorrell? Well, that's a trickier thing. First of all, you don't rely on the pass rush as much. You rely on the fact that you're in nickel personnel and you're just covering. And so you can force quarterbacks past their first couple of reads, and you just want the defensive line to harass them and disrupt them. And then secondly, I think ultimately Texas hits their highest potential next season if Alfred Collins can play one of these edge spots and be a 7-sack kind of guy. He just translates his athleticism to rushing the passer off the edge. We've seen other guys like that in the Big 12 in recent seasons. And even the sack total doesn't super matter. But if he's consistently forcing quarterbacks off their spots and forcing them to move around in a 3 or 4 man rush, now you're cooking with gas.
Interesting concepts for sure. And where are you currently with the linebacking core? Do you think we see an improvement from last year?
They will necessarily be better just as a result of being in year 2 with Jeff Choate, year 2 in the system, although I just outlined how the system could change. But I think that there will be some carryover. They will try to design the defense around setting the linebackers up for success. They will use the defensive line to make it as easy as possible for the linebackers. I know there's some philosophical disagreements on that amongst the Texas fan base, but that's what I think they'll do. And I think it certainly makes a degree of sense. When you have, Overshone finally with an offseason to lift and get stronger, I think he's like 230 pounds now. He played last season at like 210 or something. He's having an offseason to actually learn to play linebacker, get his weight up. He could be in for, the sort of leap that normally a player makes from like 2nd to 3rd season or 1st to 2nd, something like that, possible for Overshone. Jalen Ford was really kind of putting it together last year. He was pretty interesting. And if he can build on that, he might be a legitimately good linebacker like other teams would want. David Benda, sort of like Ford, but less so. These are all guys that have kind of the right abilities, except for, Overshone's kind of a little miscast. But Benda, Ford, these guys they look like Big 12 linebackers. They move like Big 12 linebackers. It's just been about experience and reps and continuity. They had the COVID season in 2020, new coaching staff and new system in 2021. You look back at Texas's history, and there's been a lot of years where they had really bad linebacker play for multiple seasons and brought the same guys back for another year. And then all of a sudden it clicks. And then they have all Big 12 linebackers and then they leave and then it starts over. So I think we should be in for a boom cycle at linebacker for the first time in a long time. Not saying these guys are going to be world beaters or anything, but I think that they could be a lot better than we've seen.
And it looks like we're going to be in nickel a good amount, meaning 5 defensive backs on the field. With the guys we have in the secondary, do we see a more aggressive, mannish looks compared to playing off like we did so much last year?
Yeah, man, they played some soft coverages last year. They played some quarters coverages where the nickel was like more of like a linebacker, even when it was Anthony Cook. He was like a space linebacker. And they played some cover three that was like what coaches call country cover three, like drop to a landmark and look at the quarterback's eyes. I mean, Kwiatkowski and Choate have some value for that. They will run kind of old school zone. They also like to run match coverage and like man coverage and mix that up, kind of do mix both coverages and get the best of both worlds. Couldn't do that last year for whatever reasons. I've heard a couple different reasons offered. They all amount to limited personnel. This year they figure to be a lot better. They have Ryan Watts to play one corner spot. He can play man coverage. He can play press bail. And then they have Jadae Barron, who was maybe the best cornerback on the team last year in terms of pure coverage ability. Now he moves to the nickel, where he looked very comfortable in the spring game. So you're talking about, being able to match the three receivers in a spread set with a corner or a nickel in man coverage. They didn't do that last year. They could do that this year, which is an enormous shift in philosophy and changes a lot of things about how the defense works and what things could look like.
And at safety, do we see a jump there, particularly in the run? And there's new players at the position, so we still don't really know who's starting yet. And oddly enough, it was the twos who had the best run stopping identity with Crawford and Blackwell in the spring game. But do you think we'll be able to stop the run better than last year?
They will look better at stopping the run because the coverages they played last year, they did not necessarily want to leave their boundary corner in man coverage that often. They did sometimes. And then the nickel always needed somebody over the top. So safeties spent a lot of the season just backpedaling and then coming up to support the run and then finding the ball spitting out somewhere where it shouldn't and then being made to look like bums. That will be very different this year. If you have the deal with nickel where your nickel is matched on the slot receiver, your safeties can stay on or inside the hash marks a lot more. One of them can drop down and support the run. One of them can drop back. They have a lot of guys, to your point, who are pretty good at coming down against the run. Maurice Blackwell, obviously, is good at that. I don't know if he'll start or not, but that is an obvious strength of his. Keaton Crawford looked very, very comfortable running downhill and blasting people. I think Jared Thompson actually might be better at it than people think. He was just put in some tough spots last year. And JD Coffey is also really terrific at it. Cook is a willing tackler. We haven't really seen him in that role, so I don't know exactly what it looks like. Suffice to say, they have lots of guys who, if allowed to play in smaller patches of grass and come down aggressively against the run, they're going to look different than they did in last year's scheme. Whether they are significantly better than last year, which they might be, or they're just better positioned, I think it will look different.
Good stuff. And looking at the whole defense, which group will be the most improved this season?
Most improved position group on defense, this is tricky. I keep wanting to answer what the most consequential improvement will be, which would be for edge or linebacker, probably. I think those improvements might happen to the degree that they need to for the defense to play well. But I think the surest answer is at corner/nickel. Fusion of talent of promoting Barron and giving him the nickel role, then adding Ryan Watts from Ohio State, backfilling him behind him with five-star Terrence Brooks. That should make a very different cornerback room and the ability to play more aggressive coverage. Might be the most consequential improvement. I think it's probably the most sure thing improvement.
And then the S&P Plus suggests Texas will have the 47th ranked defense. Do you think we end up higher or lower than that postseason?
That's such a tricky question because they have to face all these offenses. They'll be very different than last year. I think they'll be higher than that. The goal should probably be to be top 40. It just depends on how those stats will punish them for facing a lot of teams that are going fast and chucking the ball down the field a lot. Maybe by points per game, they want to be in the 20 to 25 range. They're going to score a lot of points next year. They're going to give up a lot of points in a few games, and that could be okay. You're going to be solid enough to where the other team cannot boat race you to the same way that your offense is hopefully boat racing the other defense.
Looking at just the Big 12, where does the defense rank overall?
There's so many different contingencies here. If they run this 3-3 stack idea and they really commit to it and nail down roles for everyone, or they come up with some other idea that really matches the personnel and they have a committed, workable identity, I think they can finish top 5 for sure, potentially top 3 with health and if their coverage is as good as we think it'll be. If their coverage is great, they're locking people up 1-3 with the Watts, Barron, Jameson. And then if they find a pass rusher, Alfred Collins turns out can be a terror on the edge, or like maybe Justice Finkley puts it all together as a freshman, what have you, then I think they can be top 3. The odds of everything going right, probably not that great. Maybe sort of like a mid-level Big 12 team. Hopefully they are able to leverage their strengths where they can give everybody at least some trouble.
And before you go, make sure to tell everybody where they can read all your latest breakdowns.
That'll be a major topic of conversation for the offseason, a major topic for analysis by yours truly. Find it on Inside Texas or look on Twitter. You can get, the GIF previews of what I'm about to write at Ian_A_Boyd.
And that is a wrap on Ian Boyd. And you heard the man. Go sign up at Inside Texas so you can stay up to date on all the latest strategy. Thanks for hanging out. Watch some more of my videos here. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you want to support quality Texas content. As always, hook on.